all of our systems in California, at least, hospitals use a documentation system called EPIC, EPIC. It's a charting system that we use to, keep records and communicate with each other in the hospitals. And the EPIC system, when they rolled out the COVID shots, the EPIC system gave us an updated chart for COVID, for patients with COVID. And of the 3 hospitals in the San Francisco Bay Area, the major hospitals, there's Kaiser, Sutter, and Kaiser, Sutter, Alta Bates, and St. Joseph's. Those are like the 3 main hospital systems. All 3 of them used Epic. And there were 2 different Epic platforms that were released to the staff for COVID patients. So if a patient was if a patient was diagnosed with COVID, the doctor would write the orders to pull up the chart for COVID. And we had one of 2 systems between those 3 hospitals. We had a system through Epic that either gave you a chart that was automatically documented the patient as unvaccinated. So if you are diagnosed with COVID, you're unvaccinated. And then they didn't teach us how to change the vaccination status in that chart. So every single patient who got a COVID diagnosis was automatically charted as unvaccinated. Okay. The other hospital, I think it was St. Joseph, was the other hospital. They had Epic as well. Their charting system for patients who were diagnosed with COVID gave you 2 options. You could either document that, it gave you a little drop-down bar for vaccination status. You could either document that the patient was unvaccinated or that their vaccination status was unknown. So from the rollout of those shots, I was working on the COVID floors on and off. I am certain that roughly 50 to 70% of the patients admitted to my hospital with COVID were vaccinated. They had at least one COVID vaccine.
Right. And they still got COVID.
But more importantly, the charts documented them as unvaccinated.
Right.
So then we were pushing this false agenda to the public and using that to coerce people into taking the shots, because the media and the news outlets were all saying every single patient being admitted to the hospital was unvaccinated, and that was never true. It was never true. I was taking care of those patients myself. I was looking at the notes, right? So even if that patient was transferred to me from a different unit, if they were there and at some point they were diagnosed with COVID, I could see that they were all being charted as unvaccinated. And then I could see in the notes that the staff were like, oh no, this patient is actually vaccinated, but the chart would still populate as unvaccinated. So that was a huge propaganda scheme to manipulate the public into believing lies.
How did they manage to pull this off in 2020? I mean, it's like not 1920s, not 1950s.
I think it was all through fear. And that's, again, why we come back to the homeschooling and the working in Africa. Like, it matters. So here's what I've learned through this coaching work that I'm doing now, where I'm guiding people with development of leadership and ethics, is that, and we've got studies on this that go back to the 40s and 50s. The population is made up of a bell curve of people who have the innate ability to challenge opposition, and those who don't. It's on a scale, right? It's on a bell curve. There's, a majority of the population, they'll realize that something is wrong, but they won't talk about it. And then there's about 5% of the population who they know what's wrong and they will talk about it. And then there's about, another like 30% below there that they have no idea. They're just believing what they're told. Like, they're not asking questions. They're just going along. So I was not in that 5%. I was not born that person. I was born in the middle. The only reason that I developed those skills of challenging is because I learned the skills to do it. I learned how to utilize tools for challenging authority and for standing strong, right? And a lot of that comes from homeschooling. The rest of it comes from Africa. There are some other experiences I had in my younger life where I was put in a position where I could do right or wrong and get the outcomes. Or like in high school, I could go along and, base my value and self-worth on the acceptance of my peers, but I couldn't really do that because I was in homeschool, so I was forced. And then in Africa, like I was forced to really analyze what do I have to be afraid of here? And it helped me develop the skills and exercise the muscles, right? Because that's what this is. These are muscles. These are skills that we have to learn. We have to teach our children how to have courage. And that's the thing. It's like with my colleagues even, I look at them and they're like, oh yeah, I'm ethical and I'm doing the right thing because this. And it's like, well, you think that you are, but then when the rubber hits the road, you realize you're not. And I don't think they even realize. Most of my colleagues, I don't think they realize that their ethics have failed and that they're not practicing ethically. But that's part of why I'm coming back to this as a foundation, is that if we don't start to have these conversations about what drove this, why did people go along? Why do we have all of these practitioners, and all these scientists just doing what they were told? If we don't get down to answer that first question of how did this happen, we're never going to be able to move forward and prevent this from happening again. So that's a big part of the work that I'm doing now. I'm doing work in leadership and ethics.
Do you think they can pull it off right now in 2025 once again? The same stuff?
That's a good question. I would like to say they don't, and I am an eternal optimist. Mm-hmm. So I will continue to remain in that position of no. I don't think that they could pull it off. But just like with COVID, I was wrong there too. I couldn't believe what they pulled off in that situation. I couldn't believe what my colleagues were going along with, because like I said, we would have those conversations in the break room or at the nurse's station, and they knew. A percentage of them knew. Probably 30% of my colleagues knew that we were committing crimes against humanity, that we were violating our oath. And they just didn't have the courage to do anything about it. They were afraid. Some of my good friends, they were great people. But they were afraid to do anything about it because they couldn't lose their jobs, because then they couldn't pay their mortgage, and then, they couldn't pay their student loans. So
I couldn't believe that they pulled this off with so many odd things, like the dancing nurses, right? That's what I asked you on WhatsApp, right? You were a nurse. Have you ever seen like someone
Never.
Dancing? What was that all about? It wasn't
no
only
idea.
in the US, it was around the globe.
It's crazy.
So nurses were working 24/7, right? Without any holidays. And then they are just dancing.
Well, no, that's why because all those dances came out in 2020. Remember how I told you the hospitals were dead?
But they told us that they have to put those containers in New York on a ship.
No.
Because of the dead bodies?
Yeah, no.
They had to put the dead bodies in the bags because the morgues were full?
I know nurses.
Who are all those people that died?
Yeah, I know nurses who worked in all those hospitals. There's a couple of whistleblowers from the hospitals at the epicenter of New York who will tell you exactly what I'm telling you, which is that there was never an uptick in patients in 2020. It wasn't until the rollout of the shots that we became inundated with patients. All of that started within 1 week of the rollout of the COVID vaccine to the public. So she was witnessing, I was witnessing, both of us independently contacted our management and said, hey, we're seeing a dramatic increase in drug side effect. We need to document this so that it can be recorded and researched. My friend, she was actually told, if you report these side effects, we will fire you. I was told, no, We can't report those because we cannot prove that they are being caused by the vaccines. I was receiving 3 to 4 phone calls a day from my staffing department begging me to come to work every single day. What does that mean? They were desperate for staff. This hospital has had 3 times more admissions than we've ever had since the hospital opened their doors. I went and spoke to all of our city officials publicly, and I told them what was happening in the hospitals, and I informed everybody about the things that nobody wanted to report on, and I got silenced there too. Do you know how many people I met who they themselves or their partners were targeted and destroyed for curing cancer? A practitioner who was curing cancer, they didn't want him to continue working because his work was changing the world, so they set him up. Videos planted on his computer.
Child porn.
Yes, I am of value enough to tell the truth no matter what the cost.